So we are moving on to our audience questions. Candidates we're going back to the 60-second format. So you'll have 60 seconds to answer these questions. Let's get started with Ms. Babb Tomlinson. Our first question comes from Aaron from Roseville. Aaron asks, climate change has already impacted reliability of water resources in California. At the same time, expertise in our federal scientific organizations have been gutted. How can we restore scientific expertise in federal service?
Well, science is definitely real, so we start with that, sadly. We have to restore the cuts to the EPA, and we have to restore sort of the grants that allow us to do the important climate resilient work. I'm the only candidate endorsed by the California environmental voters, and so I understand what is important to make sure that we're focused on our future. I already have a son with asthma, and so we've got to hold polluters accountable to make sure that we have the resources it takes to be able to invest in the science that keeps our climate strong. Because regardless of your Democrat, Republican, 80 or 8 or 2, we all live on the same planet. So we've got to take care of it, and I think the most critical thing we can do is pay attention to the money. If someone on this stage has taken money from Chevron or Big Oil, I really have questions about what they're going to do to make sure our climate is preserved and protected for the next generation.
How can we restore scientific expertise in federal service?
Yes, well, actually, my father was worked for the federal government when I was growing up. He actually is an engineer. He actually worked at the Department of Energy addressing things like acid rain. I know how important scientists are in government, right? Because science is true whether you believe it or not, and science should be not a matter of politics. And that's why it's so important that we actually restore the scientists who are in the civil service, who should be protected against this administration, because this administration's been trying to get rid of scientists. They've been trying to eliminate scientists because they don't want the American people to know the truth. In fact, I've spent my entire career standing up for science, both in the state legislature. I'm going to do that in Congress. We need to be sure that the American people have had access to federal science. I know that unfortunately, for example, we know that leaders in this administration have tried to hide information from federal scientists, right, of data on whether it's vaccines, the environment, other types of things, or simply fire and get rid of those scientists. And we have to stop that.
Mr. Vandenberg, how can we restore scientific expertise in federal service?
Yeah, so there's an old Mark Twain quote about California: whiskey's for drinking, water's for fighting over. The important thing is we live in a really dry state, and climate change is going to affect us here earlier than almost everybody else. It wasn't supposed to be 90 degrees in April, was it? But here we are. The fact of the matter is that we are going to have to do a lot to reinvest in federal science. So the National Science Foundation, NIH, we're going to have to rebuild even organizations that aren't scientific first, like USAID, right, to prevent pandemics around the globe and make sure people don't starve to death or that AIDS doesn't spread. But the important thing here, too, is that the Trump administration got away with firing all those people illegally against civil service protection law because there haven't been consequences. That is where we have to start with a lot of this stuff. If we are ever going to have scientists and civil servants trust us again, we need to put some of these people in jail for what they did with DOJ, and that has to be the starting point of any rebuilding effort.
Thank you very much. Mayor Guerrero, how can we restore scientific expertise in federal service?
Well, thank you so much. As a climate mayor and also three-time going to the COPs, I've been sent on behalf in the mayors, and I've been like one of 30 mayors in the convening of the parties to make sure on an international level we protect from climate change. I strongly believe what is happening is is going to get worse, and the projections show that this earth is going to get extremely hot and depleting all the water resources. It is a crisis at this point. And so seeing how recently NSF, the National Science Foundation, has been eliminated, I've been working with the scientists to try to find a way on an international level to continue to have scientists go to college and be interested and working to see how they can get funded so that we can preserve the scientists that are here in our country to get restored and to do exactly what Tyler said, to hold Trump and DOJ accountable for the firing of everybody illegally. So that's how I would find a way to maintain it at this point and restore it.
Thank you very much. District Attorney Ho, how can we restore scientific expertise in federal service?
So I run an office of about 200 lawyers, and I can tell you that my office has personally prosecuted and gone after corporations that have leaked petroleum into our groundwater, and other corporations that have dumped chemicals into our sewer system. So we prosecute polluters, and I will continue to make sure we go after those corporate polluters in Congress. But in regards to how do we protect our scientists, you know, we talked about going after DOJ. We talked about the civil service protection, but here's what we frankly need to do. We need to pass actual legislation that has enforcement mechanisms within there so that we ensure that our officials that work for the different departments, whether it's Department of Education, whether it's other departments there, and our scientists are protected from random firing and release by this administration. So we actually need to have laws with real teeth and consequences so we can then go after these individuals.
Thank you very much. This next question is going to be about artificial intelligence. We're going to start with you, Dr. Pan. AI is rapidly reshaping the workforce and has the potential to displace millions of middle-class jobs across many sectors, with over 500,000 cuts in the tech sector just in 2026 alone. What federal frameworks will you propose to ensure that the wealth generated by AI benefits the American worker rather than Silicon Valley executives? What protections would you propose for creators whose art and works have been used non-consensually to train generative AI systems? And the main part of this question, the umbrella term, what regulations or limitations would you propose to protect communities and the environment from the damage caused by massive data centers?
Yeah. Well, the federal government needs to rapidly actually work to put constraints on the damage that might be caused by AI while still ensuring that we can benefit from the promises that AI brings. But that includes, by the way, the environmental impact of those data centers, right? As they consume more energy and water, and especially with this administration limiting green energy, we just know that's going to make our climate situation worse, right? We need to be sure, for example, right now, the most common major for college students graduating is computer science, except all those entry-level jobs for coding are going away, right? We need to be sure what we figure out how we transition people to be able to benefit from the AI revolution, not just lose their job. And that's not just computer science graduates. You know, we're talking about, if we talk about autonomous cars and trucks and so forth, we need to have a plan in place. And then the other thing, of course, is I'm really concerned about, you said IP protection is really important, right? AI should not just freely scrape the hard labor of people who, from that, but also to be sure that we need to limit the harms that it's causing to people like deep fakes and other types of things. And apologize, 30 minutes too short to cover
I gave you a little extra time because there's like 3 questions in there.
Okay.
Mr. Vandenberg.
Yep.
I'll just go with the last one. What regulations or limitations would you propose to protect communities and the environment from damage caused by massive data centers?
Okay, look, AI is a great example of how politicians are always about 6 to 12 months behind the actual moment that we're in. I am worried about the abuses of AI. I am worried about things like deepfake pornography. I am worried about things like loss of IP protections. I am worried about the loss of workforce protections. You know what else I'm worried about? AI is a bubble. It is 10 times the size of the dot-com bubble by valuation. And there is no production facility that is going to save the companies that have overinvested. It's coming. If your politicians are not telling you, not just about what they're going to do about AI to protect your job, but what they're going to do when all of Silicon Valley takes a massive punch in the jaw when this goes bust, probably in the next couple of years by some estimates, they're not doing an honest day's work to tell you what the state of reality in this field actually is. AI is a ticking time bomb. As your representative, we need to start getting ready for what happens when it goes off.
Thank you very much. Mayor Guerrero, what regulations or limitations would you propose to protect communities and the environment from the damages caused by massive data centers?
Well, this is an excellent question in that mayors are in the front line when we established data centers at the local level. So that's who we hold accountable. And as a result, what we've established is the mayor's AI playbook. We've provided together in January, we've sent out a guidebook to help mayors with guidance. So when a data center comes and approaches, They don't roughshod the city with any false promises. They have these guardrails to make sure that all the resources that city, whether it be water or electricity, the people are protected first, and it doesn't all get drained to go to a data center. In looking at what we need to do, we need to establish more of that at the federal level so that we can protect local communities, whether it be counties, the unincorporated areas. There are ways to be able to work both together, but it has to have guardrails and protections for the people that are accessing the same resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much. District Attorney Ho, what regulations or limitations would you propose to protect communities and the environment from damage caused by massive data centers?
I want to go back to the original question that you posed to Dr. Pan, because my philosophy when it comes to AI or any technology, there are benefits to it, but we must always put people first. People first. That includes making sure that we protect our environment against water, against fuel, against the heat and the chemicals that come with any new technology. And also make sure that we protect our children as well. Right now, what we're seeing is chatbots talking to children in a sexual manner. What we're seeing is the production of child pornography, and there is an actual law in California related to that. And my office was the first to prosecute an artificially created child pornography case as well. And we also want to make sure that we find ways to protect jobs, environment, and people. We must put people first in every step of the way while also embracing innovation, but people must always come first. And the federal government, we should be able to take a lead on that.
Thank you very much. Ms. Babb Tomlinson, what regulations or limitations would you propose to protect communities and the environment from the damages caused by massive data centers?
The federal government is going to play an extreme role in regulating AI. It's growing fast, and we need to really take a look under the hood of what this means for our country. And so I would be a part of a task force, right, where we bring in labor unions and we bring in innovators to say, how do we make this work for the future? As it relates to data centers, the people that need to be involved are the people in the community. And so we need regulatory practices that allow the community to have full input about what is going on in their backyard before decisions are made. And I think the most egregious thing that I'm going in on day one is about our kids. I'm terrified of what kids are going to grow up in this world with AI. It's a great tool, but how do we make sure it doesn't do harm for our kids? And those are the conversations we need to have right now. We've done it before. The internet was new and shiny, and we found a way to make it work in a way that it helps advance careers, but also we need to really strongly be aggressive about the future we want, and that includes the buy-in of the community when we make those decisions.
Thank you very much. Our next question is going to start with you, Mr. Vandenberg.
Awesome.
We need to reconstruct the Supreme Court, DOJ, and the FBI.
Let's go. All right.
What specific plans do you have to reconstruct these agencies so that they work for the people and not just for one man?
Okay, so look, the Supreme Court is going to need to be brought to heel. Congress has the power by the Constitution to regulate, to change, to modify the size of the Supreme Court, and to change any of its operating rules whenever it likes. The Supreme Court doesn't want you to know that, but we absolutely do. When this country was founded, there were 3 justices on the Supreme Court. Then there were 5, 7, 9. At one time, there were 10, weirdly enough. But the funny thing is, Sam Alito, who accepted foreign titles of nobility, Clarence Thomas, who's taking money from mega billionaires, all of these, I mean, Brett Kavanaugh's just wretched in his own way, but that's a different problem. All of these people need to be brought to heel by us actually imposing our willpower on them. Congress needs to expand the Supreme Court. It needs to impose term limits. It needs to put an ethics code in, and then we need to start impeaching justices. We'll stop when you guys agree to play by the rules of the Constitution. This right-wing judicial project from the Federalist Society stops now, and I look forward to making them break to our will.
Thank you very much. Mayor Guerrero, how do you plan to reconstruct these agencies so that they work for the people and not just for one man?
I entirely agree. We need reforms, not just the Supreme Court, Department of Justice, as you see all the illegal activities that are happening there. And the FBI is becoming questionable, as we now see them siphoned off into the Department of Homeland Security to become ICE agents. That's what I've been hearing. So we need to hold everybody accountable by audits and reforms, and withholding funding until we get the information. When we didn't find out what happened with the Epstein files until started leaking out. We now know that there is not trust within either system. We see that there is a lack of transparency. So looking at reforms, making sure that we have audits and oversight to have the hearings to ensure that the Supreme Court justices are being held accountable. If we also need to have term limits, so as a congressional representative, I will push very hard to have that or to expand the number of Supreme Court justices as well. We need to do what we can to restore justice in all areas.
Thank you very much. District Attorney Ho, what specific plans do you have to reconstruct these agencies so that they work for the people and not just one man?
How do you hold people accountable, especially those in the federal level? You need to have what I call the power to investigate, the power to impeach, and the power to fund. Those three elements. First, we need to investigate people like Pam Bondi, who during the Epstein hearings wouldn't even look at the victims in the courtroom. I put away more Jeffrey Epsteins in prison than anybody in Congress. And it was a shame what happened with Pam Bondi and Donald Trump because she was protecting him. His name shows up 5,000 times in the Epstein files. Right? So we need to impeach, investigate, and withhold funding. And on the Supreme Court, we need to impeach Clarence Thomas and Sam Alioto and the rest of them for their code of ethics violation. But if we go ahead and have term limits, and that term limit happens to end during a Republican administration, we're going to be back in the same situation we were before. And as it relates to these other agencies, we need to investigate, we need to impeach, and we need to withhold funding.
Thank you very much. Ms. Babb Tomlinson. What specific plans do you have to reconstruct agencies like the Supreme Court, DOJ, and the FBI so that they work for the people and not just for one man?
So for specific agencies, I think we need to fight fire with fire a little bit. And so if DOJ doesn't understand how to do the job of the Department of Justice, we take it out of the cabinet and we put it in the direct lines of Congress. You now report to Congress, right? And we got to be creative in how we do it. We also can use pieces of legislation already on the books, like the Impoundment of 1974 Act, really nerdy of me to know that, which restricts the amount of money that the president can use without direct control from Congress. So there are levers that we can use. We just have to have the political muscle and the willpower to move past the status quo and get creative. Because one thing we know about this administration is they know how to do bad things incredibly quickly. So Democrats better get butts in seats, get creative, and start making government work for people, because that's what we're there to do.
Thank you very much. Dr. Pan, what specific plans do you have to reconstruct these agencies so that they work for the people and not just for one man?
Yeah, well, first of all, we need to be sure we have someone who's ready day one in Congress, who has experience to be able to hold this administration accountable. That includes Supreme Court reform. I think we've talked about several here, and I think we need to be sure that people understand that the federal judiciary is actually an independent branch of government, not a partisan tool of MAGA or of one party. The other thing is that we need to increase protections. Think about what they do is they get rid of the people who actually are going to stand up for justice, right? And so they need more protections. We talked about scientists. We're talking about also lawyers and prosecutors in the Department of Justice. The good ones, unfortunately, are being driven out, right? We need to be sure they have more protections. And then, yes, we need to hold the leadership accountable. Congress needs to exert every tool it has in the constitutional toolbox to hold us accountable. When we flip the House, and we need to be sure we make sure that happens. Then the House of Representatives, and hopefully we also have the Senate on our side, needs to hold this administration accountable and needs to press on all fronts to be sure that the constitutional powers, the ones that are actually written in the Constitution, are actually exerted. That includes the power of appropriation, right? Limiting appropriations, as well as other powers as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This next question is going to start with you, Mayor Guerrero. How will you put public health first in this new RFK Jr.-driven landscape in which measles is thriving, there's a post-COVID lack of trust in medicine, vaccines, and science being out of control? The wording's a little off on that. How do you plan to, how can I put this? How do you plan to reinstitute trust in the medical establishment?
Well, yes, RFK is just a mess. You know, what has happened there has just taken us back so that there is no trust. Of course, why not? Who would trust that? You know, what we need to do is have a representative there who has the experience, who understands the conditions of those that have medical needs, to fully fund that area with proper outreach, education, access to preventive care, whether it be vaccinations, whether it be regular checkups, to ensure that access to care is not only in the primary care physician setting, but also through community clinics, through mental health care as well, as we don't see that, and substance abuse treatment. There are so many facets, so many areas that there is a stigma, that we need to break that stigma and do proper outreach and education, which has been woefully underfunded and has just gotten worse under this administration.
Thank you very much. District Attorney Ho, how do you plan to reestablish trust into the medical field?
First of all, we really need to establish funding. Funding in regards to health care, in regards to the ACA subsidies, in regards to Medicaid, Medicare. But we also need to fund our scientists and our higher levels of education. You know, we have seen this in other countries. If you want to destabilize the democracy, what do? You go after the higher level of education, whether it's college, whether it's high school, whether it's our teachers. They're under attack. And the reason why they're under attack, if you destroy the basis of higher education and scientists, that's how you take out a democracy. And we've seen this with the Trump administration. Let's take a look for a moment. The toddler, the tyrant that we have in the White House when it came to COVID talked about injecting bleach into the system in order to get rid of COVID. I mean, that's what we're getting. We need to take back the narrative. I mean, he probably thinks you could, you know, cure any sort of disease with just spraying some Windex on the body, right? This is what we're dealing with, the ignorance that is coming from the top, and we need to change the narrative on that and fight back.
Thank you very much. Ms. Babb Tomlinson, how do you plan to reestablish trust in the medical field?
Well, I think it's really hard because everyone has their own experience with medicine, and so we first have to stop the misinformation and disinformation that is rampantly running around and really get people the facts where they are. I think COVID was a great opportunity for dollars directly infused in local communities for health navigators and for people that you know to tell them why it was important to get the health care that you need. And so for government to be trusted again, government's got to work for people. They've got to feel like their government is going to allow them to have low prescription drugs. They've got to feel like there's a possibility for them to continue to have medical coverage, because what this administration has done is created a public health crisis by design. We can do better. And so how do we get them to trust us is to show that government can provide those resources. And like I said, everyone deserves a medical insurance card from the time they're born to the time they die, and it shouldn't cost an arm and a leg to do that. So if we deliver on Medicare for all, people will feel empowered to trust the government to make sure they are safe, healthy, and well.
Thank you very much. Dr. Pan, how do you plan to reestablish trust in the medical field?
Well, certainly we need to call out this pro-disease, pro-cancer, pro-lower life expectancy administration led by Donald Trump with RFK Jr. You know, when we had a measles outbreak that began in Disneyland, I worked to raise our immunization rates. In fact, we haven't had an outbreak of measles that size since then, despite large measles outbreaks in the rest of the country. RFK Jr. came personally to Sacramento twice to oppose my legislation, and I beat him both times. His followers came and they assaulted me on the street. They threw blood at me from the Senate chamber. They didn't have facts on their side. They had to work on bullying and intimidation. That's what this administration does, and I did not give in. And we passed those laws. And that's why we are safer now here in California than the rest of the country where Donald Trump and RFK Jr. are having sway. That's what I'm going to do when I go to Congress. We're going to call out this administration, and we're going to be sure we protect the American people. I've done it before. I'm going to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vandenberg, how do you plan to reestablish trust in the medical field?
Well, I mean, a particularly appropriate question given the hantavirus stories that we're starting to see in the news all over again. Look, we have a medical problem in this country because we don't have Medicare for all, we don't have universal health insurance. I agree with all of that. But what we actually have when it comes to vaccines is an information problem. You want to know how we get vaccine trust back up? It's time to break up Fox News. It is time to use federal antitrust law to absolutely punish these people for what they did to us during COVID, for what they did to us since COVID. I am sure that if you live in Placer County, I promise most of you in this room have had some sort of conversation that was a little uncomfortable about vaccines at some point or another, right? That's an information issue. That's the TV in your house blaring at you every single day not to trust the Democrats to put silver in your arm or something. That's a problem of Fox, and that requires federal action to stop.
Thank you very much. We've got one more question before we move on to you guys' closing statements. So this last question, we're going to start with you, District Attorney Ho. What is your stand on protecting the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, especially the rights of trans people, and keeping California a sanctuary state?
We need to make sure that we protect the LGBTQ community, especially the trans community. What we are seeing here from the administration is a constant attack and a use of that in order to divide us. We saw the attacks that the Trump administration used against Kamala Harris. We'll continue to see it used again. We need to bring people together and protect people. You know, one of the things that really drew my family to this country is what I call the promise of America: opportunity, freedom, and second chances. But there was an inclusiveness about this country, right, that welcomed immigrants. And we really haven't talked about immigrants much here today, but I can tell you that, you know, I'm the only immigrant and refugee running in this race. And when I think back to the beauty of this country and why my family and so many other families come to this country, it's about the inclusiveness and protecting the most vulnerable among us. And I've spent 25 years doing that. And what I see this administration doing is tearing it apart. But we need to protect everyone.
Thank you very much. Ms. Babb Tomlinson, what is your stand on protecting the rights of the LGBTQ community, especially the rights of trans people, and keeping California as a sanctuary state?
Absolutely. It is a deep core value of mine as the Chief Public Affairs Officer for the largest Planned Parenthood in the country. I've spent my career fighting for the LGBTQ community, helped pass marriage equality here, Prop 3, and also helped with an initiative in the state of Nevada. And so what we need to know is that adults bullying children is wrong. That's just the bottom line. And so we need to make sure that we are protecting our LGBTQ youth in schools. This whole outing policy to parents is causing significant mental health crisis for our LGBTQ youth. And so we need to make sure that they feel heard, seen, safe, and respected. And that's what I've done in my career, and that's what it will take to Washington. And I will back down from no bully, because I'm gonna tell you, Mama Bear, don't play.
Thank you very much. Dr. Pan, what is your stance on protecting the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, especially the rights of trans people, and keeping California as a sanctuary state?
Yeah, I'm firmly in strong support of LGBTQ rights, and including the trans community. When I first ran for the state assembly, which included South Placer County, I ran in what was a safe Republican seat. My main opponent was Andy Puno, the author of Proposition 8. And in fact, that district had voted for Proposition 8 just 2 years prior. And when I ran and I beat Andy Puno, I did not back off from my advocacy for LGBTQ rights and reproductive rights. It would have been easy to do so because that's necessary to win in the seat. I didn't do that, and I still won. That's the kind of courage that you're going to be sending when you elect me to Congress, right? And when I was in the state legislature, I continued to stand strongly for LGBTQ rights. That's why I'm endorsed by Equality California, because they know I'm the fighter who's not going to give in, right? And that's why when I'm in Congress, I'm be sure that we keep government out of the exam room. We keep government out of the exam room. And everyone should have access to all the care they need, that, for example, including reproductive rights, abortion care, and gender-affirming care. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Vandenberg, what is your stance on protecting the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, especially the rights of trans people, and keeping California a sanctuary state?
Yeah, so I'm very proud to have been clear about this from the very beginning. We need to ensure that America is safe for everyone in our LGBTQ plus communities, including our trans kids and trans adults. Look, here in Placer County, we have problems with certain people getting a little up in arms about this, maybe rhymes with schmally schmandriata. But the fact of the matter is that what the Republicans are doing with our trans kids is they are trying to define who gets to be a person and who doesn't, who gets full rights and who doesn't. And whenever we compromise on an issue like that, we have already lost all the other issues. because they will pull it inwards and inwards and inwards over and over again. And I defy anybody to look in the eyes any of our trans neighbors, trans kids, and tell them that they are not exactly as beautiful and deserving of rights as the rest of us, of any background or of any identification.
Thank you very much. Mayor Guerrero, what is your stance on protecting the rights of the LGBTQ plus community, especially the rights of trans people, and keeping California a sanctuary state?
So this is personal for me. My brother is gay, and he always wants me to share that story. He grew up with two sisters, older and younger than him. We're a Hispanic Catholic family. Very difficult experience seeing what he has gone through. And for that, and not only that, I continue to work in a HIV and AIDS clinic to see those that are gay that are now struggling today with getting access to medical care so that they can retire and they can continue to live their lives healthy. We need to reduce those costs. That's why I've been endorsed by the Yolo Pride Democratic Caucus, Evan Minton, who also tried to get his reproductive rights by transgender affirmative care. And so that's why I'm endorsed, because I support the LGBTQ plus community and transgender rights, because as Tyler said, when you start moving the goalposts, it doesn't stop. So we need to protect everyone's rights and respect everybody. Thank you.
Thank you very much.